So before we dive into the session, let's take a moment to, kind of think about how we are feeling today. What are your energy levels? So feel free to type in the chat how you're feeling. Are you feeling tired, uh, exhausted, energized? I'm, it's 2 p.m. here in Boston. And I didn't sleep well yesterday, so I'm feeling a little bit tired. So I'm looking forward to all the tips from Marina. Feeling exhausted, pretty good. Yeah. So yeah, before Marina takes over, let me give you quick introduction about Sukhi. Sukhi means happiness in Sanskrit, and we understand that being a human being is an extremely challenging experience in itself. So our mission is to create a world where personalized, accessible mental health support empowers individuals and organizations alike. Our goal is to foster well-being, reduce stress, and enhance overall happiness through diverse coaches, real-time community interactions, and community-driven mental health solutions. We have seen an engagement rate of over 40% and proven stress reductions by over 46%. Next slide, Marina. Yeah, we recently launched this feature. So if you have any questions about Suki or its features, just feel free to drop in to our quick, Q&A session, which happens every Tuesday from 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. PST. So drop by for just 5 minutes for how long you like and get your questions answered. And we also constantly update the content on our platform. There are so many interesting journeys that's coming up. The latest journey that is uploaded in the platform is Projecting Confidence in the Virtual World by public speaking coach Mark Stanton. We also have journeys coming up on leadership, perfectionism. So feel free to, tune in and check out some of our journeys. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending. Over to you, Marina.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Welcome in. Thanks for being here. Those who are watching the recording, thanks for joining in and spending some time to learn a little bit about sleep. So, as Vijay mentioned, my name is Marina. I'm one of the coaches with Team Suki. I've been with the Suki platform for over 4 years now, I think. So if you've been to our workshops before, maybe you caught the one we did in December on nutrition for stress management. I also have a couple of journeys inside the Suki platform as well on stress and on grief. In my work, just for those who are not familiar with me, I started in the corporate world. I used to be a consultant and program manager. And through my own journey with burnout, I found myself in the coaching space and building my own coaching practice. And what I focus on today is holistic mental health and leadership coaching. So I work with both executive leaders as well as founders and entrepreneurs in optimizing health, both performance at work and also health at home. So really thinking about how do we create success in our careers without self-abandoning, without burning out. And sleep, I see as one of the foundational pillars of health. So I'm really excited to share with you all today. Super passionate about sleep. I think it's incredibly important, and hopefully you all will resonate with that after today's workshop. I'll keep an eye on the chat if anyone has questions that occur for you as I go through the slides. Please feel free to drop them in the chat. I'll try to pause a couple times and see if there's any questions, and then I'll also save some time at the end. I know this tends to be a question-heavy topic. Hopefully it can support you. So just wanted to start with a quick reflection and just gauge where we're all starting from and entering into this conversation. So would love to know how many hours of sleep do you get on an average night? So like a night like yesterday, just a regular Monday night. What is your typical average? And is there anything you use to track your sleep? I think most of us will know our average as adults, whether that's you're someone who can stay at 7 hours, 6 hours, 8 hours, and so on. Curious also if you use anything to track your sleep. Yeah, so an Apple Watch. I myself have my Aura Ring. I've had one for 6 years. I absolutely love it. I know we have Whoop, all sorts of other options, even apps on your phone. So there are a couple of sleep apps that you can download without any sort of physical tracker that you wear that you just kind of set aside and have it nearby next to your nightstand. So seeing if you shared 7.5 to 8 hours a night, tracking with an Apple Watch, 6 hours maybe. I use nothing to track. Great. Would love to see some more answers come in, and feel free to drop that in at any point. 6-ish hours, yeah, don't track. No worries. 7 to 8.5, and using a watch, 4.5, 5 hours weekdays, 8.5, 8 to 10 on weekends. I use Galaxy Watch to track. Yeah, that's an important distinction there. Michelle, thanks for dropping that in. I'll talk about that a little bit. So the difference between weekdays versus weekends. And I'm glad to see that you catch up on sleep a little bit on your weekends. Catching up on some of the sleep that accumulates. Awesome. Thank you for that. So first things first, and the way I structured this workshop is we'll first talk about just what happens during sleep. Why should we care? We'll talk about the stages of sleep. I think it's really important to understand what actually happens during that window of time when we are asleep. And we'll talk about our chronotype, our unique chronobiology, and then, of course, ways to maximize and optimize. And I'll leave you with some suggestions for things to do in the evening and in the morning. So if you like to call it that, an evening routine, a nighttime routine, and a morning routine, just some suggestions that I've accumulated over the years, many of which are evidence-based, and I found them to be really helpful for myself and many of my clients. So first things first, I really see the conversation around sleep being much more open, much more prominent, thanks to the work and the book by Arianna Huffington. So if you're not familiar with her, she wrote the book Thrive maybe about 10 or so years ago now. And because of the platform she had built up with Huffington Post, and she was such a visible and vocal advocate for sleep, I think it really started to bring her more and more into focus. And if you're not familiar with her story, she built Huffington Post herself, super prominent executive, travels often, has a massive team, and how she kind of woke up, for no pun intended, to the importance of sleep is she was running on empty for so long, she was experiencing burnout and sleep deprivation. And she actually, if you've ever felt that sleep deprivation when you're kind of like nodding off, even in between meetings or in a meeting, you're kind of dozing off and your head is bobbing. That happened to her. She like micro fell asleep, and she actually fell down and hit her cheekbone on the side of the table and had to get surgery. And that was her big wake up call to, wow, I am so sleep deprived that this is now becoming an issue beyond just how I feel mentally in my working hours, but now I'm actually creating this physical issue that I'm noticing in my life. And so that was her wake up call. She wrote about it in the book Thrive, which is a really great, I think, call to action for why we should all care more about sleep and why it's so important. I think many of us who are either in the corporate world or professionals or building something that we really care about, we tend to really want to compromise on sleep or find ways around that length of time that's optimal for us. I'm no stranger to this myself. I am someone who needs a lot of sleep. I could sleep for 8.5 to 9 hours nightly. That is before you introduce exercise or anything strenuous happening in life. That's really what my body prefers. And over the years, I've looked for all the ways that I could possibly hack that, shorten that length of time, make it even more optimal and efficient. How can I squeeze that time into like 6 or 7 hours? And really what we're finding is there's not really a replacement for sleep that we're aware of now. And it's so fascinating because if you think about it, we sleep for a third of our life, right? Over 25 years of our life, we will spend asleep, which I think is incredible to think about how little we still know about sleep and how little focus, even now, we still have on it just globally, right? So we still know there's tons and tons of research on sleep now. Yes, there's sleep studies, but we still know so very little about what's going on, the world of dreams, right? All of these amazing things that happen when we sleep is just so fascinating. And there's really no substitute for sleeping and all the benefits that it has for the mind and body. So a few of those things that I just want to highlight, and this is a very short list. If you were to actually look into the full list and the full scope of what's happening to the mind and body when you're asleep, it is massive. Pretty much every single part of the body and mind, every single system in the body, cardiovascular, respiratory, nervous system, immune system, all of them are benefiting from quality sleep. But just again, that short list, the brain is still very active. There's still a number of processes that are happening both in the body and in the brain, which is really the time where the brain is resetting itself on the day. It's filing away our memories, and it's also performing key physiological functions like ridding itself of protein fat buildup. And for anyone who has maybe a history in your family of any neurodegenerative diseases such as dementia, Alzheimer's, you might be familiar with how important that is with preventing those later in life. So quality sleep is important for that plaque elimination. It's also super important for the body. So our blood vessels and our heart get a break. Our muscles, tissues, and organs are all in a state of repairing themselves from exercise or from just daily functions. Super, super important there. We are eliminating excess hormones, especially stress hormones, so adrenaline and cortisol, those build up throughout the day. When we sleep, we are filing them away. The body is very active in kind of getting rid of them. And we're also secreting human growth hormone. It's one of the key hormones that is often thought of as that repair mechanism in the body. Super important when that is happening during deep sleep. And really thinking about also beyond the physical benefits, we all know how much more focused, more present, more creative we feel after a night of sleep. I have been in the health coaching space for about 7 years. I consider myself a biohacker, if I'm familiar with that word. It's really using any lifestyle interventions to make yourself your highest performing, healthiest self. It's something I always remind my colleagues and other coaches in the space is that the best hack that we could possibly have for the mind and body is just a simple quality night of sleep before we take any supplements, before we reach for, a cold shower or go to a sauna or a workout. It's always going to start with the foundation of quality sleep. So optimizing that, I think, is super, super important. It's really this pillar of health that kind of is the foundation of everything else, right? We can talk about nutrition, we can talk about fitness, and so many other ways that we can optimize health. But I really think it has to begin with sleep first, because unless we're sleeping well, our hunger cues and our digestion are going to be thrown off. Unless we're sleeping well, we're not going to be repairing our muscles well after workouts. So there's so many downstream effects from that. Of course, memory, recall, ability to problem solve, creativity. We know that with for depression, migraines, headaches, all of these things go down. And then a stronger immune system and the ability to fight infections. So there's that, again, overlap on the immune system in the body from quality sleep, super, super important as well. So before we dive into ways to optimize sleep, I just want to break down sleep from this overall term, right? Sleep and everything it encompasses into actually what is happening from the time we go to sleep to the midpoint of the night to the time right before we wake up. Because it's definitely not a homogeneous picture. There's different types of sleep that are happening at different points in the night. So first things first, the first type of sleep is light sleep. We're going to spend a little bit of the lightest type of sleep right at the beginning of the night when we're falling asleep. So it's that transition from wakefulness to sleep. Usually on many sleep trackers, that's going to be also called like your latency period, the time that it takes you to fall asleep, and that time shortly after you're actually fully asleep. So you're probably going to be in this stage from anywhere from like 10 to 20 minutes. But so that's stage one sleep, the lightest type of sleep. There is a second stage of light sleep called stage two sleep. So this is still light sleep. And we cycle in and out of light sleep throughout the rest of the night as well. So it's not just that the beginning of the night is light sleep and then the rest of it is deep sleep. We actually cycle in and out of these stages throughout the night, which I think is fascinating. So in that second stage of light sleep, our muscles are relaxing, our breathing is slowed, our brain waves are starting to slow down. So they're not yet in that deepest, slowest brainwave state, which is delta brainwave, which I'll get to in a moment. They're still a little bit more active, and this is where we're consolidating our memory and our learning from the day. I think this is fascinating to think about. We don't remember all of the details of our Sunday, right, or of our Saturday. Today is Tuesday, but we remember the key things that happen on Sunday and on Saturday and this weekend, right? If I ask you what you had for breakfast last Friday, fairly recent, but you're probably not going to recall it unless you eat the same thing every day. This is where our brain really pieces apart what is important for me to remember long term, what are the key memories, key learnings that I'm doing, and we get rid of the rest. Right? This kind of reduces that noise and that just the mental and cognitive load that we accumulate throughout our lives. So that's happening during this stage. From there, before we get into REM sleep, which is our dream sleep, deep sleep, stage 3 sleep is super important to talk about. So we spend about 75% of our night between light sleep and deep sleep. So we're cycling in and out of that. And the rest of the night is spent in REM sleep, which I'll talk about next. In deep sleep, this is our deepest, most relaxed, slowest brainwave state sleep. This is the deepest kind of stage in our brainwave that we'll be in all day. Deepest part signified by delta brainwaves. Our breathing is very slow, very relaxed. Our muscles are pretty much completely relaxed at this stage. There's very little movement that's happening. So many sleep trackers also measure the distribution between deep, light, and REM sleep based on the movement that you have. So that's one key factor that's telling us that you're in deep sleep is when sleep tracker is detecting very little movement and very slow breathing in this part of the night. And here it's important to note that we essentially front load a lot of the deep sleep in the first half of the night. So let's say if you have an average sleep-wake cycle, you go to bed at 10, you wake up somewhere around 6 or 7 a.m. A lot of the deep sleep, while we're still cycling in and out of it, is happening before 3 a.m. And then after 3 a.m., we start to switch over and really prioritize REM or dream sleep. So that's an important distinction there. It's deeply restorative for the body. So deep sleep is really associated with that repair functioning of the body. We're secreting the human growth hormone, tissue repair is happening, immune system regulation. And this is that hardest moment to wake someone up. Also, if you've ever woken up and you felt super groggy, or if you set your alarm, maybe you are someone who's trying to wake up at 5 a.m., maybe you're still getting deep sleep at that time, or you're cycling into deep sleep still. Maybe your body is, really in need of that repair. You're kind of requiring, and the body is asking for more deep sleep. We're really groggy when we wake up in deep sleep, or if someone wakes us, someone or something in the middle of the night wakes us. So that's one thing that's important to note there. Deep sleep is absolutely essential for the repairs of the body, and especially if you are someone who is really active or is experiencing a lot of stress, because all of that would tell us that the body is in need of additional time for rest and repair. And then the last stage of sleep that occurs in the beginning of the night, yes, but it also is really kind of backloaded after 3 a.m. So between the hours of 3 to 7 a.m., we spend more time in REM sleep than in the other stages. This is that dream sleep stage. This is the more active stage of sleep. So your body is likely moving more, right? If you've ever looked at someone and you realize they're dreaming, you probably see their eyelids move, their eyes are moving, they might be saying things, they may be emoting. So that's telling us that they're in that REM, rapid eye movement, dream sleep part of their sleep cycle. Heart rate and breathing become more active while the body is still, of course, at rest. Breathing is actually a little bit elevated. Brain activity is heightened, so we can measure this like on a sleep study when we actually hook up the head to electromagnetic receptors that can actually measure the brainwave states that the body goes through when we're asleep. So it actually looks really similar to an awake state. And this is what I think is so fascinating about dreams in general, like what is happening when we dream. That's beyond the scope of what we'll talk about today, but I just think it's so fascinating to think about that we have access to these states throughout our life, right? Again, 25 years of our life will be spent asleep. And when you wake up and feel groggy, also could be that you woke up in the middle of the sleep cycle. And in the long term, if you are someone who is maybe waking up and setting your alarm at a suboptimal time, which we'll talk about for your specific body, grogginess long term, so not just in the short term, you woke up, someone woke you up in deep sleep and you're super groggy and disoriented. But in the long term, if you experience a lot of brain fog or grogginess, that might be telling us that you're cutting your REM sleep too short. You're not getting enough REM sleep in the night. So that's important to note. And the last thing I want to say on this is that sleep cycles are not linear. So again, it's not that the first hour of sleep you're in light sleep, then you go into deep sleep, then you go into REM sleep. We actually cycle through these stages about an hour and a half at a time. So that might look like we spend 10 minutes in light sleep, we go into 40 minutes of deep sleep, and then we go into 30 minutes of REM sleep, and then we start it all over again. And we do that about 3 to 6 times per night, depending on your length of sleep and when you set your alarm. So the initial sleep cycles in the beginning of the night are going to be more focused on deep sleep. And then the second couple sleep cycles towards the second part of the night are going to be more focused on REM sleep. But we are always cycling. And this is an important takeaway that perhaps we can just take a moment and kind of think about here. As you know, my goal is, of course, to leave you with actionable insights. You can do the math and time from the time that I go to bed to the time that I wake up. Can I set my alarm when I have the most complete cycles of sleep? So what this could look like is about an hour and a half, so 90 minutes is how long a sleep cycle takes. You're going to feel much more refreshed when you wake up or if you set your alarm at the end of a sleep cycle. So this could look like setting your alarm. If you are, let's say, you have a really short amount of sleep to work with that night, you're running to the airport, you have an early morning flight, can you time your sleep so that you, for example, get 4.5 hours of sleep and you set your alarm instead of that extra 20 minutes that you might have to give yourself, just set it for that 4.5 hour time frame. You're likely going to be much more refreshed if you time it this way after 3 full sleep cycles instead of then starting a new sleep cycle, waking yourself in the middle of it and then feeling groggy. And maybe we've all had this experience. I know as I was learning this years ago, I started to notice this with my travel schedule. Sometimes if I do set an alarm for 4 a.m. and I wake up and I feel actually super refreshed, and of course I'm going to need a nap later that day or I'll sleep on my flight, but I actually feel initially really clear-headed for those couple hours until I get on the flight. That tells me that I timed it in such a way that I woke up at the end of a sleep cycle, not in the middle of one. Hopefully that makes sense. That's just a small way that we can all use this information to our advantage. And then similarly, if you have, a weekend day or you're looking to catch up on some sleep that you might feel like you've been running at a deficit, time it to have, an exact, let's say 9 hours, and that'll give you, about that 5 to 6 cycles of sleep during that 1.5 hours time frame. So something to think about there and play around with and work with. It's not always realistic to sleep without an alarm, of course. So the way I think of this is whenever you can, give your body a chance to wake up without an alarm. Your body knows the exact amount of sleep that it needs. Just like with food, right? We have a cue for hunger and we have a cue for when we're satiated. Your body is not going to ask for more food when we're already feeling full and when those hunger and fullness cues can be fully received. It's the same with sleep. If your body is sleeping in, it's asking for 9 to 10 hours a night sometimes. That might tell us that your body is running at a deficit, so give it what it needs. When sleep-wake cycles stabilize and when we catch up, you will think back to your ideal sleep window and maybe your body needs just 7 hours or 8 hours on a regular basis. Your body will know exactly how much sleep it needs. So just trying to balance that out with how often you wake up with an alarm versus without one. Perfect. So, and then just a quick kind of picture here. I like to include this to, again, double down on how amazing our biology is, how cool the brain is, and the fact that we sleep and all of these processes are happening. A majority of our day is spent somewhere between beta and alpha. So this is our wakefulness state. We're problem solving here. I'm likely in beta right now because I'm giving a presentation. I'm talking a lot. Maybe some of you are receiving this when you're in alpha. It's sparking some curiosity. You're taking it in. You're maybe taking some notes. Before we go to sleep, that sleepiness feeling or the feeling that we have right before we wake up, that's theta brainwave state. So it's a lot slower than our day-to-day wakefulness. And then our deepest sleep, really feeling restorative functions of the body, that's happening in that delta, the slowest brainwave state. So how do we, now that we know what happens during the night, make the most of our individual sleep-wake cycle? I think the first thing that's important to mention is that we all do have our own unique individual sleep-wake cycle. So if you have ever felt frustrated that maybe you and your partner have totally different sleep-wake cycles, or you've ever tried to fit in to the sleep-wake cycle of your spouse, a friend, a loved one, team member, I often see this come up in team dynamics where we really all try to match up to one exact, uh, time frame. Because again, we want to be productive, we want to get a lot done, but it's actually leaving many of us at a disadvantage. Not all, but some, because we're not all designed to be waking up at the exact same time or going to sleep at the exact same time. There are unique variations to each person. So, um, a few things about the chronotype. So this entire, let me skip forward real quick. So the entire science devoted to studying these unique differences in sleep-wake cycles is called chronobiology. And it's fascinating that it's really recent. So as recent as 2017, there's a team that won the Nobel Peace Prize in Medicine for their discoveries in the newly discovered proteins that govern these differences in people. So the time that we want to go to bed, the time that we naturally want to wake up, and those variations, the fact that they exist, this is really, really recent. So it was discovered that there's a specific gene and a specific protein that regulates our internal clock. That they've come to call that the circadian clock protein. And that's really helping us better understand these biological differences that control sleep and alertness patterns in humans. Um, so our chronotype is our unique sleep-wake cycle. What I mean by that is, do you do well with going to sleep at 10 p.m.? Or do you know yourself to be someone who does really well staying up until midnight? And you don't want to be told to go to sleep early. You want to go to bed at midnight or 12:30 because you really do well that way. Are you someone who wakes up naturally at 6 a.m. and you're full of energy? You don't even need an alarm. You don't need a lot of caffeine to feel alert. Or are you someone who does really well sleeping in until 8 or 9 a.m., right? How can we first find out this about ourselves? And then as much as we can, work within the constraints of our work life, our schedule, right, parenting, to see how can we optimize for some of these differences that might exist individually. So that internal clock is governed by a part of our brain. It's called the SCN, that governs when we are sleepy or when we are alert. And there's a number of different things that go into this, but again, there are certain biological differences that we're kind of born with. And the interesting thing about this is, I'll talk about the book and a resource that I'll leave you all with as well that I want you to check out in a moment. But there is, when they found a specific gene, they did also find that there's a gene mutation for this gene that allows certain people to sleep less than others. So certain people with this gene mutation can sleep as little as 4 or 5 hours a night and function really well, just as someone who is getting 8 or 9 hours. However, that gene mutation, I think it's like a couple percent of the entire population. So I think many of, maybe myself previously, when I worked in corporate and was not honoring my body, and many of my teammates at the time maybe thought we had this gene mutation, but statistically, I just think that's very unlikely. So I just want to highlight that these biological differences, yes, for some of us, some people need very little sleep because of this, and they're able to function well. But a majority of us could really benefit from connecting with our unique sleep-wake cycle, really maybe tracking this over a period of time, sticking to a consistent schedule to really learn when and how you do best as it relates to your sleep-wake cycle. Um, a resource to find out what your specific chronotype is the work of Dr. Michael Bruce. He is a sleep researcher. He has been on many media outlets. This is his website. He has a published book. It's called The Power of When. So on the site, he has a quiz. So this is not going to be exact, of course, because it's going to be you in your own words describing your sleep-wake cycle through this quiz, which is not, of course, a scientific way to find it out. But I do think it's helpful for us to generally get a gauge for where you're at. This is, of course, outside of doing a dedicated sleep study. And if you are someone who's a troubled sleeper, or you know that you snore, or perhaps you're suspecting that you have sleep apnea, I can't emphasize enough how important it is to get a sleep study done. I know that they can sometimes be a little bit maybe challenging, or a little bit like there's some nerves that go into getting something like that done. But again, doubling down on how important sleep is for all of health downstream from there, it's really something that we want to take seriously and seek out. I've had a number of clients and friends who have gone through a sleep study, and it was really, really illuminating for them, because you can actually see what's going on deeply in your body without guessing. But for those who are just curious and interested, maybe you have had that conflict with someone in your life who's telling you that you need to wake up at a certain time, and you want to back that up with some results and some research, I recommend The Power of When. There's also amazing resources at The Power of When. He now has a sleep tracker that you can get at home that essentially conducts a sleeping test for you. So that's also another lightweight way to dive deeper and see if there are any sleep issues that are occurring. But finding that out, what you'll learn is that you likely fall in one of these four categories. Again, this is newer emerging research, but it's something that is being explored more and more, especially after that 2017 study and discovery. So figuring out your chronotype. Who are you? What do you do best with as far as sleep-wake cycles? He categorizes people into these four main categories. So we have the bears, wolves, lions, and dolphins. So just real quick on each chronotype. The bear is that most common chronotype. I myself, I know that I'm a bear. This is about 50% of the world population. And this is also who we generally have mirrored the 9 to 5 work schedule for. So this is one of the things that he mentions in the book, that the 9 to 5 work schedule is usually developed around the fact that most people in the world function well with that schedule. But of course, not everyone, because there are these biological differences that exist. This is where I tell people, as much as it is within your control, what can you do to optimize if you find out that you maybe not a bear chronotype, that's not your innate sleep-wake cycle. So bears are about, they'll go to bed around 10, 11 p.m., wake up at 7 a.m. So really their sleep-wake cycle follows the sun really closely. Most energy in the morning. Overall, they have pretty consistent energy throughout the day until the evening hours, when they start to feel tired and sleepy, and then they usually don't have any issues going to bed right around that 10 to 11 p.m. window of time. Wolves are the night owls, so these are the people who are most productive in the evening. This is also associated in his research with people who are really creative, like artistic, people who write a lot. They're actually finding that their most productive hours are after sundown, so until they go to bed around midnight or even slightly later. So they naturally, because of that, that's offset, right? They wake up later as well, so around 8 to 9 a.m. That's about 15 to 20% of people. Then we have lions, which are the early birds. They are early to fall asleep, early to rise. These are the people that I know I have envied for a large portion of my life, especially when I was a student in college. They need very little, no alarms, no coffee, just wake up early. They probably work out first thing in the morning without issue. Not me. I wish. They also do struggle with social events at night because they start to produce melatonin and notice tiredness around 9, 10 p.m. So for these people, they're usually really goal oriented, get a ton done during the day, but they might struggle with social engagements in the evenings because, of course, a lot of our life is also uh, built around connecting with people after work hours and into the evening. So that's also about 15 to 20% of people. And then there are dolphins. So these are the troubled sleepers, about 10% of the population. These are people who might struggle a little bit more with anxiety, and one correlation he finds is perfectionism. That is that ruminating brain that might be always on and it prevents falling asleep easily at night. So they'll sleep within a shorter time frame, so 11:30 to 6:30 a.m. And perhaps sleep is more disrupted, so they wake up more throughout the night. So they're most productive from mid-morning to early afternoon once they've had a chance to really fully kind of wake up and get their day started is when they feel most productive. Um, so yeah, one thing that I would suggest here is just check out the resources here. The book is fascinating, called The Power of When as well. So that's one thing I leave my readers, professionals with is just find out where you're at, just so that you can also kind of optimize for when do you set your alarm? Can you communicate more with your team, with your loved ones, with especially anyone you do share a home with, because it's so important, right, to have a little bit more understanding and empathy for our differences in chronobiology. I think that's really important and can really help a lot of relationships. So let's talk about actionable steps to maximize sleep quality. And I saw Nikki had the question around increasing deep sleep. Yeah, a few things for sure. So that can help there. First things is, so we talked about chronobiology is the study of our individual unique differences in our sleep-wake cycle. Now, when we talk about the sleep-wake cycle in general as a whole, what we're really talking about are circadian rhythm. And the larger circadian rhythm conversation, this is not something that only affects sleep. It pretty much affects everything that we feel throughout the day, the hormones that are secreted throughout the day. It's much, much bigger than just our sleep, but it's all interconnected. So our circadian rhythm is essentially our internal timing mechanism for everything. There's an optimal time to work out. There's an optimal time to eat. There's an optimal time to give a presentation. Thankfully for me, it falls during this window of time for me. I'm most alert and most productive during this window of time right now. But it's these general rhythms that operate on a 24-hour cycle, and that governs, yes, sleep and wakefulness, but also hunger cues, body temperature, blood pressure, when we're coordinated. So think about finding out when is your most coordinated time for the time that you do go on a bike ride or do a workout or lift some weights, right? We want to be timing these things according to that more optimal time for us individually. And Dr. Michael Blues does talk about this in the book as well. But going back to, right, kind of zooming out, there's this macro level circadian rhythm that's governing everything. Let's then go back into sleep and wakefulness, which is one part of our circadian rhythm. So our chronobiology, our sleep-wake cycle specifically, is super responsive to fluctuations from light. So this is one of the actionable steps that we can start to think about as far as ways to optimize when you feel tired, when you go to sleep, ideally making it easier to fall asleep at night if that's something you ever struggle with. And that's being mindful of light exposure throughout the day. And I know that, you might have heard of things like blue blocking glasses or just eliminating blue light. I want to emphasize that blue light is beneficial during the day. It's not that we want to block blue light at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday. What we do want to be mindful of is prioritizing for blue light throughout the morning into the sunset hours, and then red light and warm hues after sunset into nighttime. So we actually want to maximize the amount of natural light from early morning until sundown. So one of the best tips that I have for anyone who is a troubled sleeper is as soon as you wake up, actually get outside. It could just be 10 minutes. You don't need to do anything. You can take a walk around the block. You could just sit and look at your emails if that is part of your routine. Ideally, that's something you can start to be more mindful of first thing in the morning. But whatever it is that you do in the morning, just do it outside, or depending on the season, if it's cold, if it's raining, just do it next to a window, because that natural light, that hue of sunlight, that is technically blue in nature. It's blue, it's bright, it's sunlight being perceived by our retina and our eye. We do want that first thing in the morning and throughout the day. We want plenty of that in our surroundings. And the interesting thing is, even on a cloudy day, if you are just next to a window, our retina, our brain are still being exposed to light from the sun, even if it's being clouded. Our brain is super smart. It knows what time of day it is. So just doing more things either outdoors first thing in the morning, next to a window, and just prioritizing access to sunlight. This might look like if you do work indoors, going outside, maybe at least once during your lunch break, during lunch hours. It's also super helpful for glucose levels to get outside and do a short 10-minute walk after you eat a meal. It's really helpful for our blood glucose levels as well. Um, so blue light is great during the day, and we do want to avoid it after sundown in our time zone. So if you live somewhere where sun sets around 7 p.m., that's the time where you generally want to start the transition to warmer hues, both in your surroundings and in the technology that you use. And luckily, many devices, laptops, phones now come with certain presets that you can have, right? As far as, either in your screen time or the brightness settings on your phone, you can program it so that the hue becomes much more warm, yellow, or red after sundown. It's going to be an amazing thing to do to help fall asleep easier. So if we're orienting ourselves to fall asleep around 10 to 11 p.m., we do want to start to consume warmer light around 7 p.m. We want to start to eliminate blue light between that window of time before we go to sleep so that you can fall asleep easier. And essentially what's happening here is we're telling our brain and our body through our retina, through our brain, it's sending cues throughout the body that it's time to start to wind down. It's sunset, the sun is setting, and now it's time for the body to get ready for a quality night of sleep. The light is one of the most important cues in that cycle and in that message that we send to our body overall. So minimize exposure to blue light in the evening hours, switch to those night shift options. If you have Android device or a laptop that's not an Apple product, F.Lux is a plugin that you can install. But again, I think most laptops will now have this setting. Most devices, Kindles, and so on will have the ability to adjust brightness. And ideally, we even minimize screen time and ebook readers in the evening. So if you can read print, that's also going to be one of the most amazing things that you can do. I also try to do this with the lights that I have in my home. So I use incandescent lights and not overhead lights after sundown as well. I have a sea salt lamp that's on my bedside table. So when I read by just a much softer, warmer hue of light. So this is definitely something that we can mirror, not with our technology, but also in the home. And then a few other ways to optimize sleep. So we already talked a little bit about setting your alarm strategically. So try to time it to the end of your last 90-minute cycle of sleep. Now that we know it's about an hour and a half, 90 minutes for each sleep cycle, you can hopefully start to do a little bit of lightweight math before you go to sleep and see, am I better off waking up at 8 a.m. instead of 8:30 because I'll actually be catching the end of the sleep cycle? Just try it out, right? Play around with this. What's most important in any of these suggestions is that you learn best what works for your body and for your biology and for your routine, of course. Maintaining a consistent sleep schedule, I know this is easier said than done, but it has been shown that if we can maintain consistency with our sleep schedule, both on the weekdays and the weekends, it's ideal. However, that suggestion also needs to be offset with the fact that many of us do have a sleep debt that we accumulate throughout the week. If it isn't realistic for you to implement some of these, alarm setting or sleeping in without an alarm, maybe you do get more sleep during the weekend. I think that is important to keep. If your body is asking for extra sleep, give it extra sleep anytime it needs to. And then over time, if you were to maybe start to track your sleep, start to keep a sleep journal, modify and tweak some of these small levers that we can pull throughout the day, and just bring sleep more into focus, maybe you can over time start to work with keeping a sleep wake cycle consistently. So let's say every day, regardless if it's a weekend or a weekday, you go to bed at 11 and you wake up at 6. Keeping that consistency, it really does train the body. And yes, to an extent, your body will start to naturally wake up around that same time. And the more that it does that, the more efficient sleep becomes. So it's you'll start to notice that your sleep schedule becomes a little bit more regular that way. And the amount of deep and REM sleep might also stabilize that way because your body is getting used to, I am sleeping 8 hours a night consistently, or I'm sleeping 7 hours a night consistently. Let me get what I need from this window of time because I'm being kind of repeatedly, um, this is the sleep wake cycle that I'm in. Um, Optimizing your sleep environment. So also super important to be mindful of what works for you and for your biology. The ideal sleep temperature is unique to us. It's often referenced around 69 degrees, but in general, a colder room that's cold, quiet, and dark is going to be more conducive to our sleep environment. The colder it is in our environment, the easier it is to fall asleep and stay asleep. So that's something also to play around with. If maybe your thermostat is set at like 73 at night, just try, right? This might be lowering by 1 degree a night until you reach your ideal sleep temperature. But that's a huge impact on sleep quality is the temperature in the room that you're in. And then also darkness. So I'll keep real quick here on the topic of darkness and having a quiet room. I sleep with an eye mask, earplugs, and sometimes mouth tape pretty much every night of my life because I recognize that that's super important for me. Some people find that they don't like that feeling. For me, it's kind of like a non-negotiable. But a few things, even if you don't do an eye mask, generally keeping your blinds closed and even turning off any sort of screens like clocks, analog clocks that are in the room, or even any blue or red lights that are coming off of any technology. So like plugs, electrical sockets, anything like that. You can get blackout tape, tiny pieces of it that you can find on Amazon, online, anywhere that you can put over any of that technology. I have that over my microwave, over my oven. All of that is locked so that if I do happen to wake up in the middle of the night, I'm not getting any of those blue light signals coming into my retina, because that's also an easy way to then have a harder time falling asleep. So any sort of night lights should always be that warm red hue. I found amazing night lights if you ever need them that are also like small Himalayan sea salt lamps or little tubes. But just always prioritizing that there's no blue light in your room, in your environment. So in the event that you do wake up throughout the night, that sometimes tends to happen, you have an easier time falling asleep. So a cold, dark, quiet room without any sort of light, any sort of screen is going to be ideal. And then another thing to be mindful of I think of it as kind of a low hanging fruit is timing your dinner so that it's at least 2 hours before going to sleep. And that's because when we're in an active process of digestion, our blood and our cardiovascular system, our digestive system, all of it is still engaged, right? We're digesting food, we're extracting nutrients, our stomach is engaged, our intestines are engaged. So it's a very active process. So ideally, all of that is complete so that the body can be as close to rest as possible by the time it's 10, 11 p.m., midnight, depending on your chronotype, and you can easily go to sleep at that point. So that's an important one as well. And then I'll leave you with a few suggestions for morning and evening routines. And I'll touch on a few more things here, and then I'll leave some time for questions, of course. So a few things before I get into just kind of the step by step of an evening routine. I think it's amazing. Sometimes when I talk about the chronotypes and especially the dolphin chronotype, a lot of people tend to say, that's me. Oh my gosh, this is terrible. This is a real thing. I knew it. I have insomnia. Before we jump into, kind of catastrophizing around some of this knowledge, I do want to share that there's ways that we can buffer some of those biological, predispositions that we have. There's ways that we can optimize the sleep that we do get. We can make it easier for the body to go to sleep and prevent some of that, lying in bed for 30 minutes to an hour, getting stressed, taking the stress from the day with you into those hours. And then the stress just builds and builds because you're laying awake. So one thing that is evidence-based that's been found to be really effective is a 2017 study found that writing down what you feel incomplete with before bed can stop nighttime rumination. So the way I think of this is a majority of my work is focused on reducing stress, anxiety, and burnout. And one of the things I often hear from my clients is people will ask, what does it mean if I have anxiety first thing in the morning before anything has happened? I wake up and I feel that surge of cortisol and adrenaline. My heart is racing already. What's that about? One of the things that we can look to is that there's a lot of things that are weighing on us. The to-do list is long. The rumination is happening last thing before bed. And so we take that stress with us from yesterday into tomorrow, and it kind of creates this nonstop cycle. So a few things that help us rid the body from excess adrenaline, cortisol, and with it rumination is staying hydrated. So flushing the body of those excess stress hormones once in a while, using a sauna, which is going to be a really great way to calm the body, the mind, and our muscles, and also to flush the body of excess cortisol that builds up throughout the day. But one low hanging fruit, again, I love thinking about, okay, what's most accessible for the most amount of people is journaling, clearing your mind before you go to bed. A lot of times those thoughts that are swirling and ruminating late at night, they're just unfinished trains of thought. They're unfinished worries. They're things that are just feeling incomplete, things that we didn't get to. And we always want to clean our slate and our to-do list as much as possible at the end of the day. And then, of course, that's not realistic for many of us, myself included. So one small way to clear the mind and prepare ourselves for a quality night of sleep is just writing those things down. It's taking them out of the mind and bringing them into the physical reality, because when you write something down, it makes the thought tangible and real so that you don't have to keep looping it. You can come back to it now in the morning or later in the week. And this is a list of some of the questions that I like that have worked well for me, and others. You can either take a screenshot or a photo of this, but really reflecting on what went well, what felt challenging, what are some things I'm currently worried about, what things do I need to prioritize tomorrow to have a great day, things that you're grateful for. Gratitude is one of the best ways to come back to a parasympathetic nervous system state. That's the relaxed state in the body. And what do I need to remember from today to make tomorrow great? So just closing any of those open tabs in the mind before you actually start to fully wind down, and before you actually even maybe get into bed, doing something like this before you're fully in your bed or in your bedroom. So a few other things, I think of this as kind of like a step-by-step progression into quality sleep that happens at night, ideally. So 2 hours before bed, have your last meal. Ideally, you're not snacking and re-engaging the digestive system after that point of time, because again, if the digestive system is still active, it's going to be more difficult to fall asleep. About an hour before bed, reduce or pause screen time altogether. Ideally, if you are still on your screen, it's that warm or red hue that's coming through. It's no longer blue light at a minimum. Have a cup of soothing nighttime tea. That could be chamomile, that could be valerian root. There's a lot of amazing options available. But we want to time that about an hour before bed so that we have a chance to empty our bladder. Again, thinking about preventing any disruptions to sleep as much as possible. Having the body, giving it a chance to actually metabolize whatever is that soothing component of either tea or a supplement that you take for bedtime. And then within that hour to 30-minute time frame before bed, some of my favorite ways to relax is, of course, journaling, reflecting to close the day out. deep breathing techniques, light stretching. Now, this does emphasize, I have to emphasize the word light. You don't want to be, elevating your blood pressure rate too high, but light stretching, even as you get into bed, some very gentle yoga poses, many of them could be done in bed. Child's pose, stretching side to side, clasping arms behind the back, stretching your neck, just releasing some of that physical tension that's built up throughout the day. Reading a book or reading print instead of an ebook reader, diffusing soothing essential oils, or using candles or other aromatherapy. One of the best ways to wind down and rest is through scents that you associate with rest. Scent is the most impactful sense associated with memory and with our limbic brain. So it has a direct impact on our nervous system and the ability to relax. Taking a hot shower or bath, again, thinking of ways to wind down and relax the body, the physical tension, and our muscles. And really keeping your bedroom space sacred. So as much as you can, really creating that association beyond just like eliminating distractions. It creates an association of the body and mind that when I'm in my bedroom, when I'm getting into bed, all this time is reserved for is now quality sleep. It's time to wind down. So it creates that association there. And then also a few things that are important because our sleep-wake cycle, right? Our chronobiology, our circadian rhythm continues all throughout the day. It's not exclusive to nighttime. So another nice way to balance your sleep-wake cycle is to take action in the morning as well on things that are going to help you have more steady energy throughout the day. So my favorite thing is have 16 ounces of water. First thing, it's going to give you energy and it's going to kickstart your metabolism. So I have a 16-ounce glass of water with me pretty much all the time, but I leave it on my bedside table before I go to sleep. So I know it's there first thing. Take a short walk outside, again, honoring how important light is and that natural light as a cue in your eyes, or again, doing anything that you're going to do next to a window. Light stretching or more energizing breath patterns to wake up the body and the nervous system. We're in theta for about 30 minutes after we wake up in that slower brainwave state. We're actually really receptive and susceptible to anything we hear, read, or see during the first 30 minutes upon waking up and the last 30 minutes of bedtime, which is also why it's so important to hopefully let go of as much of technology, news, social media as possible during those times. But just know that whenever you wake up, you are most impressionable and most susceptible to what you see and hear. So can you use that time to listen to calming music, any sort of uplifting information, motivating, relaxing content that you can consume is going to be best. And ideally keeping your phone on airplane mode until the morning routine is complete. So those are just a few things that I wanted to leave you all with. I'm going to pause here for questions if there's any others. And I just really quickly want to go back to Nikki said, is there a way to increase deep sleep? One of my favorite ways to increase deep sleep is going to be through weightlifting. And that is because anytime we do put any sort of extra positive strain or stress on the body, like weightlifting, it's going to trigger more need for repair at night. So it's kind of like a backdoor hack at getting more deep sleep because your body is going to need more deep sleep to repair your muscles, but you're also going to benefit from all the other ways that you benefit in deep sleep, like your brain, your cognition, your focus, all of that is still going to improve as well. So that's one of those kind of more simple ways. I do find sauna use can be really helpful for that as well. And then there are adaptogens and, for example, the functional mushroom family, lion's mane specifically. This is not medical advice, so please, do your research on that to make sure that it might be a right option for you. I always want to be mindful of that anytime I share any sort of supplements, because supplements and adaptogens can be just as potent and powerful as pharmaceuticals. But I have really benefited, and a lot of the clients I work with benefit from lion's mane for deep sleep increases as well. Any other questions? Any questions, reflections, things that I can support you all with individually? Feel free to drop them in the chat. I'll also real quick here drop ways that you can connect and stay in touch. I do reply. Feel free to send me a note if you have to run or if you have individual questions for yourself. Just send me an email. My website and my LinkedIn is here as well if you're curious about the larger scope of what I do and my work. So that's there. But yeah, with the last few minutes here before we wrap up, if anyone would like to share anything, any closing thoughts, any ahas, or any questions, please feel free to drop them in. Yeah, thank you, Anna. Thanks for being here. I hope this was helpful. Thank you, Nikki. Yeah, happy to share. There's so much more in the world of sleep that I can touch on, but hopefully this gets you some actionable steps. Yeah, thank you for being here. If anyone also wants to come off mute and share anything, you're welcome to. If not, have a good rest of your day. Thanks, Michelle. All right. Well, if nothing else for now, thank you all for being here. Appreciate you spending the time. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out, and hope to see you on the next webinar. Thanks, everyone. All right. Take care, everyone. Have a good rest of your day. Hope you get some good sleep tonight.